I'm Billy Ryan, and this is the No One Is Watching podcast, where we explore high-performing teams, individuals, and leaders, and dig deep to find out what makes them tick. This show highlights the DNA shared by elite performers, the process by which they leverage that talent, and ultimately helps you apply those lessons to your own life, business, or team. All right, so I know you're a big Alabama guy, so what is your favorite Nick Saban quote? He's got like a million of them.
Oh my gosh. I'm always a sucker for liking a Nick Saban quote on something like LinkedIn. Wow, you came out hot with this one. Let's see. I think the one that's resonated with me lately is "You're not owed anything." There's this speech that he gives in a press conference, and he's basically saying, when you wake up every morning, you're not owed anything. And that's just resonated with me lately. So it's a much longer quote than that. You basically have to earn it every day. And so I'll tell you, Nick is quite the leadership philosopher, and learned a lot from just listening to his press conferences.
Yeah, no, he's really good. He's really good. The one I always liked was mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. Right? They just don't want to hang around each other.
I think he said that when he was hanging out with Kobe Bryant.
Well, that would make sense. The Kobe stuff. I've talked before about the Kobe stuff, where I didn't appreciate him really for what he was when he was alive, and even when he was playing. Yeah. And then you just start, you kind of studying him and reading a little bit more about him. Like that guy was wired pretty uniquely.
Yeah. And you hear some of the stories of him being at the gym at like 5 a.m. after a game the night before, and getting his work in. And I think one of the things that people misunderstand about those guys is to be great, it's a lot of lonely time. It's a lot of time spent by yourself, working on your craft. And you can even apply that to leadership too, right?
100%.
A lot of time thinking, a lot of time worrying, a lot of time reading and growing.
Yeah, I mean, look, that was the inspiration behind this whole project for me, right? It was just like the stuff that goes on when nobody's watching, and you can't just like wake up Monday morning and show up and you'd be like, all right, today I'm going to be the leader, right? Like I'm going to flip the switch at 9 a.m. and be ready to go. Yeah. Like it's like anything else. You got to work at it.
Ben Horowitz, when people say, are CEOs made or are they born? And he says, it's like asking if a Jolly Rancher is made or born. And then he says, like, there's nothing natural about being a leader that you're just born with, right? Like there's some people with charisma, but and certainly that may help them in certain situations. But at the end of the day, like leadership is not, it's not something you're just born with, and it's a skill you've got to develop just like anything else.
Yeah. So you guys have been around for a while. And so you saw, I always harken it back to COVID, because I think that was a big paradigm shift for leadership, because the old model was in office, beehive mentality, feed off the energy. You can pop into somebody's office or cubicle and kind of shoot the breeze. And if you fit that profile you just touched on, charismatic, extroverted, whatever it may be, that a lot of times comes across as leadership. But then in COVID, for a lot of folks, you were required to, hey, if I want to talk to Matthew, I've got to set 30 minutes on his calendar, and we're going to have a Zoom meeting, right? And I can't just be like, hey, so how's it going? You got to be respectful of that time. You got to be deliberate and thoughtful, intentional about how you're going to lead and what you're going to be talking about and how you're going to be growing your team. So what was that like for you guys at Evernest?
I think there's like a long tail of trust that you've built, seeing people, face to face. And I think what happened during COVID is we were able to leverage that for a good 12 to 18 months. And I think people saw the financial benefits of not having to travel, and obviously the personal benefits of not having to travel. But I will tell you, in 2025, kind of 5 years post COVID, I am spending as much time on the road now trying to build trust with the organization as I ever have. Of course, it's obviously bigger than it ever has been, but I still think it is important. John Maxwell always says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And
Mm-hmm.
I've just find it really hard to build relationships through a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
And I've just been on the road trying to build relationships, and that way that gives me the ability to lead, or the permission to lead these folks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you guys have undergone some pretty impressive growth over the last, couple of years, and the last maybe year in particular. Right. And so I know you're a thoughtful guy. I know you care about a lot of this stuff, the culture and the people. But to your point, that's tough to balance with that level of explosive growth. So how do you approach balancing that? I mean, as a CEO, you can't be getting FaceTime with everybody that often, right? If you're growing that fast. So how do you balance that?
I will tell you, I'm being stretched now. Every time you grow the organization in a meaningful way, it stretches your leadership ability, right? Like, leading an organization of 25 people is way different than leading an organization of 100, and leading 400 is way different than 100. And today we're almost 700 people. And so I'm growing and stretching now. You've probably experienced this too. You go on your leadership journey and you read a book at 25 people that you reread at 700 people, and all of a sudden the book has a completely different
It's a
meaning.
totally
And
different book, right?
it's
Yeah.
a different book. It's like, when did somebody rewrite this thing? And I think that's the message, is, as a leader, as you're growing an organization, especially if you're growing a fast growing organization, you're gonna keep going through this period of, Dan Sullivan calls it courage, where you don't know all the answers, but you have to have the courage to try to figure it out, and the patience to, and the discipline to try to figure it out. And so I'm growing right now probably as much as I ever have, because we almost doubled the size of the organization about 8 months ago. But it's great. I'm learning a lot. I'm struggling a lot, and that's where really growth personally, I think, happens, is in that struggle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If it's too easy, you get complacent, you get kind of fat and happy, and sometimes by the time you realize it, you're like, I kind of let my guard down, right? And I got
Yeah.
and I got caught.
And I think a lot of organizations, you get to a point where you are complacent, and maybe you don't want to continue to grow it, and you don't want to go to that. You don't want to give up to go up. And so that's where organizations stagnate. And that may be okay. I mean, that may be the right thing for that person personally. But to continue to grow an organization, continue to manage and lead more people, you're going to have to keep reinventing yourself. I mean, my day today is so different from my day even 5 years ago. I was in the weeds. I was focusing on operations. I was focusing on processes. And today I do none of that. I have a really, and that would be the other part of your original question, is you have to spend a lot of time with the leaders. First of all, you have to put great people in the seats beneath you. And Jim Collins says a leader should be judged by the people that are reporting to him or her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's right. And then when you put those fantastic people in place, you have to spend a lot of time with them on the vision of where the organization is headed. It would be dumb for me, using another Steve Jobs quote, it would be dumb for me to hire really smart people and tell them what to do. It's the smart thing is to hire smart people, show them where we're going, and then let them tell me what to do.
Right. Yeah. There's so many layers to that alignment. You've got to find the right person, which is easy to say, really hard to do, and then you've got to sort of calibrate along that, goal and vision. And then to your point, you have to empower them. I mean, I draw back to sports, and you look at whether it's executive trees or coach trees. You've got these people that have been wildly successful, and then you look up and there's 15 people scattered across the industry that tie back to them in one way, shape, or form. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, which is just the lone wolf, stone cold killer who's won championships, but there's no footprint of, like, if he disappears, there's like no record of him ever being there, and it's not a knock on either. I mean, I think I resonate and I don't want to say respect, but I guess I appreciate the former a little bit more than the latter. But They're just two very different skill sets. It's to your point of building a company and like, I'm just going to drive this thing, right? And eventually, whether it's when you get to 10 people or 1,000 people, like, okay, I can't do this by myself anymore. And if you haven't been proactive in that, I better surround myself with some talented folks. It either stagnates or it just collapses because you can't shoulder all that by yourself, right?
Well, it goes back to the Nick Saban coaching tree is a perfect example of this. It's not like Nick hired Lane Kiffin or Kirby Smart or any of these coaches they weren't great. They were already great coaches, but now when you take a combination of a great coach and then teach him or her the principles of success and maintaining success, there's no you would it would Kirby Smart was a great coach, probably would have been a great coach without Nick Saban, but he is the best coach today as a result of spending almost a decade under Nick's like tutelage, so to speak. And I mean, going back to Nick Saban, I think he doesn't get as much credit for that as he probably deserves. Is he's
Yeah.
he should be credited not only for the success of LSU and Alabama, he should be credited for the success of Ole Miss and Texas and Georgia and all these organizations that people spent so much time studying under him.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I'm a New England kid, and so I followed Belichick, and and him and Saban are close and have followed that path, and they're a perfect example, right? That there's a lot of people that because of New England's success have gotten big opportunities,
Yeah,
but almost none of them have been successful, which is really interesting to me, right? So it's like and that's not to say they're not good coaches or good leaders or any of that, but it's the ability to sort of extract what that special sauce is and then make it your own over here. And you can be a great tactician and a great X's and O's guy or even a great leader. But I drive back to baseball. It's like you can be the most talented guy in the world in AAA. And hey, I know I'm talented enough to be a big leaguer, but until you actually do it, you don't know, right? Because
yeah.
you see it on TV or you see it from a distance, and it's kind of the same thing. Like until you run your own show, now they've been around winning. They know what it feels like. They know kind of how their leader did it. But stepping into those shoes, I mean, obviously, is a very different situation.
And I think that great leaders, um, I think there's a super good principle here that if I'm a young ball player or I'm a young coach or I'm a young even executive and I want to be super successful one day, I would take less money to work for the equivalent of the Nick Sabans or as you with the idea that this is like learning from somebody like that. The incremental dollars that you will make on the back end of your career are so much greater than I would work for free for Nick Saban for 3 or 4 years just because of it's like a free education.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure plenty of people have. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, there's so many people that are desperate or hungry or passionate to work in that space that you're right. I mean, you got to take the long view of what am I going to get out of this and what's the ROI 10 years from now instead of like, can I make an extra 10 grand over the next 12 months,
Yeah.
Um, so take me back to like you played baseball in college. What was harder for you? Your first year, your first SEC road trip, or your first year as a startup? What was more
Yeah.
eye opening?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely the startup because, look, I was a really good high school baseball player. I was, a great bench warmer in college. I always joke I had a uniform. I got to wear a uniform and got to see a lot of great games from some really good seats and played with some really incredible guys. But for me, starting the business was, and this business has gone through certain iterations. Like it's kind of like restarted itself at least one time and maybe multiple times. But the first, I think nobody, and maybe this is probably the case with sports too, right? If you knew how hard it would be to be a big leaguer, would you really have done it? Now you're at the point now where you're on the precipice of making the big leagues, or you're in the big leagues. But all the hard work that's gone into this at this point, you have to be kind of like a little bit insane to do that.
Yep.
And I think that's the same way with a startup is if I had known how hard this would be, I guarantee you I wouldn't have done it. Now I'm at a point now where I'm glad that I did it, but there's not a day that goes by where it's not hard.
Mhm.
And as the organization grows, every single day I get a bit of bad news that I didn't want to hear, right? Like you have 700 people out operating and doing things, and bad things happen. And a lot of those bad things get handled way lower in the organization and I never hear about it. But today, all I hear are the bad news that there are no clear answers and we don't have all the information. And so I get to make decisions in situations where it's not a black and white answer, and you've got to make a call based on very
And they're
limited
bringing it to you
information.
because you've got to solve the impossible problem, right?
That's
Nobody
right.
else could
That's
fix it.
right.
So that's why it crosses your desk.
That's exactly right. That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And that's the right thing, right?
Yeah.
But you can imagine Jeff Bezos talks about if he wakes up every day and makes three important decisions, and that's all he did, that
Yeah.
would be a great day in his world. And
Hmm.
so, and I think this also can kind of be brought back to athletes is you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself so that when the time is right to perform, then you're ready to perform. I think a lot of young athletes are focused on having fun and getting the financial and the fun rewards for being a college athlete or being a big leaguer. But the truth is that the ones that are long in the space that stay longer are the ones that take care of themselves, that show up ready to play every day. It's just a big difference. And I didn't know that when I was in college. I mean, I was as guilty of. We would have like a Friday, Saturday game, and then we would all go out on Saturday night, even if we were on the road,
Yep.
and show up at the Sunday afternoon game less than 100%.
So suboptimal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the good news is we generally met the other team out, so they were suboptimal too. So it was we were both
Yeah.
in similar situation.
Well, yeah, that's the big thing, right? When you run into the kids getting out of college and they may fly a little too high to the sun one night. It's like, hey, do what you want to do in your personal. You just got to post the next day. You got to be there,
Yeah,
and that's one thing that the athlete, you can puke in the trash cans, but you got to be there. You got to
you
be
got to
there
be there for
working.
BP.
Yep. Yeah. And that's something that I think you're right. It's a lot easier to stay in shape than it is to get in shape. Right. And so kind of where we started this conversation of like staying sharp as a leader and trying to grow like every day, and that's where that concept of just incremental growth every single day. What can I do to get better? I think the really great organizations are able to distill that ethos down. And that's really sort of at their core. Right. Because
Yeah,
that extrapolates out to everybody in the organization. It means something different to everybody. And it's probably much harder to find for you than someone who's been in with your group for 2 years that's in a more sort of operational tactical role, because yours is as a leader, it's a little bit less concrete. It's a little bit more squishy, and it kind of means something different to everybody. But you just can't take your eye off of it. You have to be mindful of it. And I know you are. Obviously, you think a lot about it, you read a lot about it, and it shows itself. But it also shows itself when guys don't, or when people don't, I should say. The I think back in the leaders that I always really respected, that I've been fortunate to cross paths with, were the ones that had no qualms with walking into a room at a big decision point and saying, "Guys, I don't know what to do here.
yeah,
Here's what I'm seeing, but you guys tell me, where are we
yeah.
at with this?" Right? And rather than like puffing up and saying, "Okay, here's what we're doing," and you're like, "I know you don't believe that."
That's right. And was something interesting you said, whether you're a business person or an athlete, there's this like talent will take you to a certain level, right? Like there are
Hmm.
talented guys that were talented and didn't work hard at it and were talented in high school. And there were talented guys in college that didn't work hard at it. But at some point, the work, it's like some combination of preparation and work and discipline plus the talent, right? Like you can't not have the talent, but at some point you're going to meet somebody that has put in the reps. And I think about that often in terms of business. It's like what I'm doing here, there are no easy answers. There's no obvious next step, and it is very squishy. And the only thing that I can do is consistently fill my mind with different ideas and different what I would call mental models, so that when the time is right, I kind of like lean on some uh, Warren, not Warren Buffett, but Charlie Munger, his partner, who's recently passed away. He
Hmm.
says he has a lattice work of mental models in his mind. And so what I've tried to do is create somewhat of a lattice work of CEO mental models in my mind. And so what happens is when a decision comes my way, the more I'm prepared for it, the bigger my lattice work is. And I can say, hey, this decision kind of fits into this mental model and this mental model. And this is probably the right answer. It's not 100% of the time, but it's way more easy to hang your decisions on a framework or a lattice of mental models than it is to shoot from the hip every time and use other people's experience. Right? That's a great thing to do, is like read people's biographies. You will realize that we just in today's society, we just like, you think of Abe Lincoln and you think of like the Civil War, and you think of all the heroics of being president. And of course, you think of him also being assassinated as a result of it. But he had a really tough life up
Yeah.
until that point. He lost children. He lost elections. His wife had a lot of
Hmm.
emotional problems, and so like you think of Abe Lincoln as being this heroic person, and he is, but he had such a tough life to get to that point, and maybe that's what gave him permission to be the heroic person. And I think as we are growing as leaders and as we're growing as athletes and leaders, then I think it's super important that you realize most days are hard, and most
Hmm.
days should be hard. That's what gives you the permission to have the days that are what I would call the sunshine.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that the scar tissue that is built up is really powerful, and there's no shortcut to that, right? We're in the age of Chat GPT and AI and all that stuff, and um, you could you could type everything you just said into Chat GPT, and it's going to spit something out to you that you could try to hang your hat on, but there is no shortcut. You've got to have the reps in there, and it can't just be theoretical knowledge, and so that is I think the grind of being a leader is exactly that. You can't just sit in a corner office and it's great to empower people and hire good people, but you can't just sit back and let them do it and
Yeah,
watch. You have to be engaged, because similar to, again, like staying in shape versus getting in shape, if you're not doing it yourself, when that unsolvable problem does hit your desk, you're not conditioned to actually
that's
solve
right.
it. You've got to, like, well, let's see what Chat GPT says here.
And one of the things I tell my team is there is no autopilot. Like you're never going to get to a point in your baseball career or football career or work career where you can just like hit autopilot. I mean, maybe there's people that can. I don't. But I have not found it. And if you want to continue to grow an organization and be successful, there's just no autopilot out there. And so you've got to show up every day ready and prepared to work and ready and prepared to make decisions. And like as a young leader, I was always like, oh, if I can just get to this point, if I can
Yeah.
just, get a COO or get a CFO, and then all of a sudden my life will somehow get magically easier. And having great people does make your life easier, but it doesn't. Now all of a sudden they elevate you to a different world where you don't know what you're doing there either.
Right.
So um, I think that that's also a thing that once I learned that I was never going to get somewhere to a destination where everything would magically get easier, it made the journey somehow easier because I knew it was just always going to be like this. So we also have a principle at Evernest called embrace the grind. Like once I embrace the grind, now all of a sudden everything becomes a little bit easier because I know there's no destination. I don't have like a destination mindset.
Right. Yeah, I think the great leaders and the ones that are self aware, and most of them are self aware, right? But there's a humility there where it's not just about like dragging everybody along with you because you've got all the answers, right? You want to empower them and you want to challenge them to make them better, but that in turn is going to make you better. It's gonna probably push you up to a level that you didn't know existed, right? Not to say that you're going to master that level, but like your head's going to be up in the clouds. You're like, I didn't know this stuff was up here. Now I got to figure out how to deal with this, right? Instead of being a couple rungs down where you're kind of operating. And then that I don't know if that ever stops, right? Because
Yeah.
if you do it successfully enough, you wind up hiring more good people. The people that you hired at the ground floor are no longer at the ground floor, right? And they're pushing that ceiling up. Hey, real quick, if you're getting value from the show, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, and if you're so inclined, go ahead and leave a 5-star review while you're at it. It helps more people like you find this podcast, and honestly, that simple form of support, it makes a difference. All right, back to the conversation. Upwards.
John Maxwell has a principle he calls the law of the lid, and he said an organization is never going to grow higher than the leader.
Yeah.
And when I think I can think about that through the lens of baseball, right? The coach can or the manager can only do so much, but you have like leadership on the team, and it seems like self-led teammates. When you have a leader that is exceptional, he or she brings the organization up to his or her level. And that's the way I think about it here as well. It's where we have, and you can imagine in 700 people, we have markets and we have people, departments and people that are running. And where we have great leaders, that department grows, that department's super healthy. Or same way with the market, like we have a great leader there, that market grows and it's super healthy. And there, if I'm thinking through the idea of I want to grow a department or I want to grow an organization or I want to grow a successful team, then I need to take it on myself not to be the lid on that team's growth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you set the tone, right? You sort of crystallize what that ethos is. I did some work years ago with the Braves where we took a similar approach with some of the minor league players and sort of the rah-rah speech I gave them. This is when they're 19 years old, whatever it is. And guys, when you get there, if we're gonna hang a banner, it's gonna be because of what you guys do in the field. And it really doesn't matter what the GM says or the manager says. Like the culture that we're gonna create ultimately is going to be what you'll tolerate from yourself and what you're going to tolerate from your teammates. Because the manager's going to walk out of the clubhouse and you guys are still going to be sitting there. Now, are you going to like roll your eyes and say, all right, whatever, dude? Or are you going to look each other in the eye and say, yeah, that's right, let's go. And the really good ones can do that. And they can go on you can go take a 2-week vacation and you're not worried about things falling apart because you've got the right people steering the ship along with you.
Going back to Nick Saban, probably if you hadn't brought him up, I wouldn't bring him up as much. But clearly now he's top of mind. But he said his best teams were player led,
yeah,
and not coach led. Like if the coach was having to set curfews and make sure everybody shows up to practice on time and get their treatment in, that wasn't a very good team. If the players were holding each other accountable to being in bed and showing up on time, those were the best teams. And so I just think about that everywhere. Every organization like that. When the team starts to take accountability for itself, it's very magical. But it takes in an environment where that doesn't exist today, it takes one person stiffening their back and saying, "Hey, I'm not going to allow this to continue to happen." And that's at great personal risk to that person, because there's definitely going to be some pushback. Like, who are you? Like, you went 0 for 4 today, and how can you say that how can you tell us what to do? And I went 2 for 5. It,
Yep.
it, but the truth is, it's going to take that type of personality. It takes that. That's why Kobe, Jordan, some of these really tough personalities, they had the guts to be like, hey, that's not going to happen on my team.
Yep. Yeah, because they were the hardest workers on their teams, right? And
Yeah,
that's the other thing, is that's the leading by example. Yeah, they're ungodly
that's the
talented,
permission.
right? Exactly. Because it's I had a conversation recently. It's like, if Randy Johnson's your pitching coach, and you're a 5'10" righty, he can teach you some things, but he did it very differently. There's a
Yeah,
reason that a lot of the good coaches weren't the best players, right? Because they
yeah, they were.
had to think about it. They were self-made. They had to fail their way forward a lot of times. Where Ted Williams just rolled out of bed and he was raking, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I think I would have made a great coach. Like if somebody asked me the other day, what would you well, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing? And I was like, I would be a coach. I love it. I think because I was an average player, I thought about the game more. I think about the
Yep.
game more. You can, especially with baseball, there's so many different situations and so many different nuances to the game that I think I would have made a great coach. And so maybe one day, if I make enough money, I'll go back and be a high school coach. I don't know if I want to be in college and recruit, and probably too late for me to make it up through the minor leagues into the big leagues. So I'll stick with high school.
Well, it's really impactful stuff. I mean, and we're in a world where everybody thinks they're going to be a big leaguer when they're 11, and they're walking the rankings, but in reality, you're not, right? Like, I mean, just look at the numbers, you're not. But all those life lessons you're going to extract from that with the right coaching and the right support are hugely impactful. You said something a minute ago. I want to go back to is sort of the concept of that self-policing culture and how powerful that is. Um, there's two sides to that, right? You said that it takes someone kind of stiffening their backbone. If that's the wrong person that just happens to be the loudest voice in the room, and the guy or gal that wants to be the leader or just has a big personality, right? That can blow up real fast. So it takes the leader. Again, it gets back to like embracing the grind, I guess, as an organization. I mean, you then have to pour into your team so they understand what you're trying to do, what you stand for. Really, for me, those are the biggest sort of boxes to check. Like, just what the mission critical stuff. You can do it with your own flavor, but at the end of the day, we all got to wind up here,
Yeah.
And if you have that and there's alignment, then it's a little bit easier to say, okay, now you guys go, roll the balls out there, go get them, and you guys decide what you're going to tolerate. But you have to be really, you kind of have to be targeted with that, in my opinion. You have to hit the bullseye with what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it.
And if I was a baseball GM and I was putting together a team, character would be a huge piece of that, right? Because to your point, the last thing I would want is the wrong voice speaking the loudest and leading the team in the wrong direction. And if you can get the right, it sounds to me based on, because, when you're in tune with like leadership words, you hear things, and it sounds to me like Aaron Judge is that guy in the Yankees locker room, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, he's got all the talent and all the gifts, and but it's like, how do you make sure that the biggest voice in the locker, and it doesn't have to be the Aaron Judge, right? There
Sure.
was a perfect example would be the Cubs back in 2016 or 2018, whenever they won the World Series.
Yeah.
It was David Ross, right? And
Yep.
David Ross was at the end of his career, but he was the loudest voice in that locker room, and he was the guy that kept everybody accountable, kept everybody, and you could just see how the players fed off of his energy, even when he wasn't playing, right? Like he was the
Well, I think it's more
backup.
often than not. It's usually not the superstar, right? I mean, it's usually, there's a great book called The Captain Class. Who let's see, Sam Walker. It's sitting on my bookshelf. I had to look at the author. But that's sort of the premise of the whole book. Is it's usually like, the role player, the backup catcher, the glue guy, right? The one that makes it all sort of flow. And you look around major league coaching staffs or even in the NFL, I mean, you don't see a lot of Hall of Famers running around managing big league teams or coaching the NFL, right? They're usually like D3 college offensive linemen that just got into coaching and grinded their butts off. Or it's the utility player. I mean, you don't see a lot of pitchers become managers, right? Because
Right.
pitchers are out on an island. They're controlling what they can control, and everybody except the catchers behind them. Right? You do see a lot of catchers because they see the whole field. They have to be thinking along with everything. You see a lot of backup catchers because, to your point, like you're doing all that, and you're working with the pen in the bullpen with the pitchers, and you're watching the game. Like you're managing along with the manager when you're playing. And I think that really ties in again to hiring people that can see the field. You can have a really good operator that's just like lights out. I don't have to worry about him. He's just going to do it, right? But if I ask him to understand what the person to his left is doing, no shot, right? Because he's just right here. And so that's the part where it's like the generalist versus like the specialist. You can do it either way, but the balance is easier to find, in my opinion, as a generalist.
And as I grew the organization, Billy, it's kind of interesting. You talked about the generalist versus the specialist. As the organization gets bigger, you require more specialists.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started, I personally was a generalist, and I had a bunch of generalists on the team because everybody was. And so if you're kind of like in startup world and you're starting something, you need people that are the utility player that are consistently willing to jump in and do whatever. Today, everybody operates in departments, and we just look for killer specialists.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just one unique thing. As you grow an organization, the types of people you look for continue to change.
Yeah. I mean, it's, keep using sports analogies for obvious reasons, but it's, you've got a really good team. You just got to go find that sharpshooter, the guy that can just drain threes and post up and hit a big three when you need it, right? That guy doesn't do anything for you if you're a bad team, right? So you're fine tuning at that point. You're looking on the edges to get better. That's what gets fun though, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And what's the Wrexham Ryan Reynolds soccer team?
Yeah.
Have you watched some of the, I had to go to the Philippines 2 different times in the last 6 months. And that's like a 15-hour flight from San Francisco to Manila. So it's a long flight, and you kind of run out of books to read. At some point you just need to veg out. And I was watching that Wrexham documentary, but as they've I don't think a team's ever done this, but as they've gone up through the organizations, the different leagues,
mm-hmm.
they have had to continue to add talent at each level to continue to push past the next level. And I think about that similar to growing an organization. How can we use the model of what they've done to grow a business or grow a ball club? It's pretty interesting, and certainly it takes money. And Ryan Reynolds doesn't lack any of that. But it's also interesting that they've been able to work their way through each one of those, and adding talent all along the way is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's like the evolution of your culture and of what your vision is. And if it should, in my opinion, it should always be anchored sort of the same core. But that funnel gets bigger and bigger, right? And we always talked about high performing versus high maintenance. If you got 10 people in your organization, you've got someone that's just a pain. He's super talented, but it's just a cancer. Can't you at no cost can you bring that in, because it's just going to blow the whole thing up. There's not enough people. If you've got 1,000 people and you need your sharpshooter, okay, I'm just going to put you over here, like in your corner. Stay there and do what you do at a very high level. Don't bother anybody else, right? But you can't do that with a small sort of agile startup type environment.
Totally agree. One interesting story, Phil Jackson, when he was coaching the Bulls, Dennis Rodman, I don't know if you remember this, but it was like playoff time, and Dennis Rodman decided he wanted to go to Vegas instead of practice.
Yeah, he went to Vegas, disappeared.
Yeah, and one of the reporters asked Phil, he said, could Michael Jordan go do that? Could Scottie Pippen go do that? And Phil's like, no, only Dennis Rodman can do that. Yep. If we had a bunch of Dennis Rodmans in this world, then the world would descend into chaos. But he had to let Dennis Rodman do that. And maybe
Yep.
that's your killer salesperson that can be off
Yep.
on an island uh, doing his or her thing. But it was pretty interesting because he was like, no, this is only a Dennis Rodman thing. I'm only letting Dennis Rodman do it. If Michael asks me, I'm not going to let him do it.
Yeah. And Rodman's a perfect example of what I was just talking about. He's like in my head as I'm thinking about these things. Because I think about Rodman, I mean, as eccentric as probably any athlete ever, um, but he played hard, and
He
his
did.
teammates loved him. I mean, he was obviously talented and produced, but he was also like a good teammate, and he had their back. Now he was weird as all get out. Um, but it's the John Wooden quote too about Lou Alcindor. Like, I'm gonna treat everybody fairly, but I'm not gonna treat everybody the same. This guy's way
Right.
better than you, right? He's got different. I'm gonna make exceptions for him that I'm not gonna make for you. Like, that's just the way the world works. And we would always try to balance that. Like, yeah, if you, and that's where you are as an athlete, right? Like, the other balance that they strike in my mind is it's high performing, high maintenance, but it's also what you were touching on earlier. When you're younger, you don't know any better. It's confident and alpha and hard charging and ambitious with like a modicum of self-awareness and humility, right? You don't want to be too humble and say, man, that guy's really good. I don't know if I can hit this guy, right? You be, yeah, damn right I can hit him, right? And get up
Right.
there, just like dumb enough to go do it. Like, you don't know what you're up against, right? And then eventually, right, we're all told at different points that it's time to hang him up, and you realize, like, yeah, I'm just not at that level. Um,
Yeah.
and
That
I'm
was
always
a,
fascinated by that balance, right? Not just in
yeah.
sports and everything.
Well, and it's also, it goes back to every time the organization here gets bigger, it requires me to have courage to take that next step. And
Mm-hmm.
as athletes go throughout their career, going from little leagues to high school to college, each step requires a next level of courage to go say, hey, I'm I'm a little nervous or I'm a little scared, but I'm going to go do it anyways. And just recognizing that everybody, when they took the next step, wondered if they were good enough to do that, and having the courage to go compete and do that. That Warren Buffett tells a funny story. Um, he talked about like public speaking, and there's a great Jerry Seinfeld quote that says, people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy at
Right,
a funeral.
right,
And Warren Buffett said, I took a class on public speaking so that not so that my knees would stop knocking. It's how I could learn to communicate while my knees were knocking. And so when I think about athletes, we're all of our knees are knocking when we get up there and we're starting to get to the next level. And you just got to learn how to compete when your knees are knocking.
yeah, 100%. And I think that's in my opinion why former athletes, and it doesn't have to be professional, college, or even high school, quite honestly, but people that have that mentality are hugely valuable to organizations because they know how to compete, they know how to bounce back from failure because we're all going to do it, and it doesn't phase them. And that's where, getting back to your earlier point about like the grind and kind of having to build up the scar tissue and get those reps. If you don't do that, I mean, life is, I'll get on my, I'll be the old man yelling at the clouds for a minute. Life is way easier for our kids than it was for us, right? And that's wonderful, but it also scares me. And that,
Sure.
like, eventually you're going to get punched in the nose. And how are you going to respond to that? Like, are you just going to fold, or are you going to be able to bounce back? So, like, the resiliency that comes with being an athlete or starting a business and having it fail, or asking a girl out and she says no. I mean, whatever, right? Like, how do you bounce back from that? That's where I always want to do. That's, I always ask people, hey, tell me when you failed, right?
Yeah.
How did you fail? Why did you fail? And then what did you do after you failed? That's the answer that I always like lock in on.
Yeah. You reminded me of something. There's a great book out there called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's by a guy
Yeah.
named Ben Horowitz.
Yep.
And he says that successful CEOs, they don't, that the mediocre ones will say, oh, it was this brilliant idea and this brilliant move that I made. But he said the ones that are like incredibly successful, all of them said, look, I just didn't quit.
Yeah.
And 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 so it was kind of like that really settled with me. And I think about that a lot, right? As long as I don't quit, then good things are going to happen, and keep fighting. And I will tell you, as the CEO of this organization, most days are hard and what I would consider bad days. Then there's way more bad days than there are good days, and that's just shocking to me, right? That it can feel like that at this level of the organization, and on the outside it looks like we're having some success, but the truth is on the inside it's just a grind, and we're continuing to get punched in the gut on a consistent basis. And our goal is just to keep grinding and not quit.
Yeah. I mean, it's 100% just staying in the game, right? I mean, so you make a poker analogy, just don't go bust and
Yep.
stay in long enough. And you just might get that big hand and you cash out. Right. But like what you were just talking about, I'm guilty of the same exact thing where if you can zoom out and look from the outside in, you're like, okay, we're doing pretty good here. Right. Like the organization's healthy. Like we're progressing. Like we're okay. But it feels like you're in just a fist fight every day. And I attribute that, at least in me, it's like you're aspirational, you want to do great things, you have this bar set, you have this brass ring that you're reaching for, you're not there yet. So like every day that you're not there or you don't feel like you got at least an inch closer feels like a failure. But that's frankly how you got Evernest to where it is now. If you were just like, hey, we're doing pretty good, like there's no way Evernest would be where it is. There's no chance. You're driving that thing because you have it inside you. And obviously have other folks that feel the same way, where you're not willing to accept like the C plus kind of day. It needs to be an A day.
Yeah. Yeah. Evernest is, it's, there's been some measure of luck. Um,
Sure.
and to your point, when I think about growing a business, you nailed it. It is stay in the game to where there's some portion of good luck and bad luck things that happen. And what you can't allow is some series of bad luck things to knock you out of the game.
Right.
It's similar to poker, right? Bad hands knocking you out of the game. But you also need to maximize your good luck. And this is kind of a Jim Collins thought, but you're going to go through streaks of bad hands, you're going to go through streaks of good hands, you're going to go through years of mediocre hands, and it really is how you play those hands, and not getting a zero, not getting busted, to grow the organization.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, defense wins championships, right? But you can't win if you never get the ball, right? So if you're always backpedaling on defense, you can prevent them from scoring, right? Which is the staying alive part, staying in the game. But eventually you got to know when you got to shoot your shot, right? You've got to be like, all right, here's our opportunity and I'm taking it, and there's plenty of you're backpedaling every day, right? How often do you get the chance to really shoot it? And you've got to have the right people on the team. Like that's where you don't want to be scrambling the jets trying to figure out this thing's coming tomorrow because I just got wind of it. We're not prepared, right?
Yeah.
So it's just dumb luck. We're going to give it our best and hope for a positive outcome. Like that's a bad strategy.
In fact, the best time to be shooting your shot is when other people are playing defense.
Oh yeah, right.
It's not like sports where if everybody was playing defense and I was shooting a shot against everybody playing defense, it's harder. While other organizations are playing defense, my ability to play offense while they're playing defense just means there's just less competition.
Well, you look at every massive economic downturn that this country's had, right? There are empires that are built out of that because people are taking those shots when everybody's playing defense. Right? They're
Yeah.
opportunistic when it calls for it.
Buffett says to be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing I love about him is he's just so humble and just simple. Like it's the simple foundational principles that you're like, everybody. I always think like everybody looks at high performers and things, people that have done amazing things, and they're like, that's a different species than me. I could never do something like that. And they just stayed in the game longer than you did,
They
right?
did.
And they were smart, they were talented. Don't get me wrong, but they just stayed the course. And there's a Peter Thiel quote from years ago that I read that really resonated with me, where he talks about startups and founders, and I forget what the percentage is, but it's like 80% of startup founders are on the spectrum. And his reasoning behind that is that all of these external forces, people telling you it's a stupid idea, it'll never work, you can't hire anybody, you can't get funding. There's a million reasons why startups fail. They're they're less or not at all affected by it because of how their brain's wired. They're just like, no, this is right, and I'm going to go, and they just kind of block out that noise, and it always stuck with me, right? And I think that's true. I don't think everybody's on the spectrum, but I think that everybody has that ability to just keep their eyes on the prize and go if they have enough conviction. And it's not even the right idea, right? You look at these serial entrepreneurs that have built multiple $1 million, $1 billion companies. They're not subject matter experts in all those areas, right? They're hyper talented and hyper focused when the occasion calls for it, and they stay the course.
That's right. They know enough, and they get the right people around them to build those organizations.
It's a much more concise way to say it. So property management is not glamorous, right? So what drew you to that? What drew you to that? And then what's kept you in it?
Yeah, the thing people need to know about property management is you have an owner that's your client, and then you have a resident that lives in a home. We do single family property management across the country in about 50 different markets. And all you deal with is problems all day. And whether it's lease a house, house hasn't rented, or somebody hasn't paid rent, or something is broken. And so it takes a certain personality to appreciate property management. The whole reason for being is to solve problems. And what I have found is that people get into this business two ways. It's either a family business and they basically fall into it because that's what their parents did, or they never intended on getting in the business, but something drug them in. And that was my story back during the great financial crisis of '08 through 2012. I was buying and selling houses. I had 30 houses that I couldn't sell when the real estate market crashed, and I moved residents in them. And I had this decision point where I said, I'm either going to go do something else, or I'm going to start this property management business and try to make it in the real estate world. And I'm just a grinder, not a quitter. I decided I'm gonna start this property management business. So that's what I did with 30 homes. I had some great partners that were very helpful and supportive at the time. And we've grown that from 30 homes to 20,000 homes today. But
Wow.
I never intentionally said, oh, property management's a great business. This is a great opportunity. I'm going to go like running into it. It was basically forced into that situation. And as I started to learn about the property management space, especially what I focus on, which is single family rentals, it was a very fragmented market. You can imagine a lot of mom and pops out there. And the opportunity that I started to see about 2012 or 2013 was there's no national players out there. There's no like a commercial or a commercial like version of this, or an institutional version of this would be like a Gray Star. There's no Gray Stars in the single family world. And it's a hard business, right? You generally have one owner, one resident, one vendor. It's the houses in one location. It's just a really hard problem to solve, but just figured out. I got really excited about the business when I realized some combination of technology, great people, and the opportunity set. Like this was a coming opportunity because institutions were starting to get into the space and buy. That's how you and I met, was through one of our institutional clients, and it just seemed like it wasn't like perfect in my mind. I think entrepreneurs go back and then they sensationalize the story. But the more I learned, just the better and better it got, and decided to go in this thing with 2 feet about 2013 or 2014, and really focus on growing the business. So we 100x the business from, call it 2013 to 2015.
Wow.
Or excuse me, 2025. Sorry, 2030, over 12 years, 2013 to 2025.
So it's a thankless business. You're not getting a lot of attaboys when somebody renews their lease, right? Like it's just you are only dealing with problems. So
yeah, in fact, you can renew 9 leases, and the owner is frustrated that the 10th one didn't get renewed.
Yeah, you are the offensive lineman of the real estate space, right? When you hear your name, it's because you got called for holding, and everybody hates you.
That's right. It's either the offensive lineman or the assistant coach that gets no glory, no anything, unless something bad happens.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you lead a team that is dispersed across 50 markets, including internationally, that is on 24/7, that is in a thankless industry. All you deal with all day is problems, and there's, I would imagine, minimal, if no, positive feedback from clients. I mean, maybe that's an overstatement, but a majority of it has to be just another fire today. Like, how do you lead a
Yeah.
team, keep morale up, keep them motivated in that climate?
So two things come to mind. One is vision, right? I think our team gets excited about where we're headed, and we have a vision to grow the business from the 20,000 doors we are today to 250,000 doors by the end of the decade. So if you think about, if you work at Evernest, growing your career, if a business is going to grow, 12x or whatever that is, then that's going to give me all sorts of opportunities to lead and manage more people, do more things. And so I think our team gets really excited about that. Maybe they're not excited about property management, but that's the means for me to do more for my family, do more for my
Right.
career. I think the other thing that is really important here is you've got to create a healthy organization internally where you put great people around where yeah, it's tough dealing with things externally, and you have to do that, and that's kind of like the job. But when you deal with really great people internally, and you have a great organizational culture, which is really hard to build, and you have to be super intentional.
Mm-hmm.
We're very thoughtful about our organization and the culture, and you can just imagine being in 19 different states, and then yeah, you mentioned it. We're in two different countries, the Philippines and Mexico. We have team members there. Like, you have to be incredibly intentional to build a culture, but when you do that, then people want to stick around here.
Yeah. Yeah. I was, I spent 15 years in an industry where um, it was a calling, right? It was a passion. Everybody that did it was there because it was in their blood. They just wanted to be a part of sports. Um, and I had some close friends that we would do some deep thinking and talk about things from a cultural perspective and leadership. And everybody's like, yeah, it's a family here. It's a family. And everyone's like, you know what? Just like hold the phone on the family stuff, right? Like, every one of us is here to get fired someday. Like, it's gonna happen. So we're all getting paid to be here. It's a job, right? Like, I value my family's at my house, and I'm going to protect them
And I
before I
can't
protect
fire
you,
them.
right? I cannot fire them. Um, but you don't need to take, in my mind, that's a bridge too far, right? Like, you don't need to call it a family. Like, this is an organization, it's a company. You can make a great living and support your family. You can grow personally and professionally, and there's all these great things, because people do want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, right? And that's
That's
the
right.
cool thing about what you guys are doing, is that it doesn't. I mean, when I was getting out of baseball, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. Like, I don't want to say I didn't care, but everybody was talking to, like, hey, what do you want? I'm like, I was sort of industry agnostic. I don't. You can say we're going to build bridges or cure cancer or sell vacuums door to door. Like, tell me about who I'm going to be working with and what are we trying to accomplish and how. What's the path forward? What's the culture about? All these things that, like, I had really locked in on the last half of my baseball career, because it's applicable everywhere. It didn't really matter what the mechanics of what I was doing, right? And so that's got to apply to a lot of folks in property management, because nobody says, hey, I want to pick up garbage when I grow up, or I want to be a janitor. But, like, and that's not a knock on those people, right? That is valuable, important work. They do it for other reasons. They don't do it for the love of the game, so to speak. And there's having that perspective as a leader, I think, is important to let them to understand, right? Like, hey, you're not going to die on the Evernest cross necessarily, right? You're here for other reasons, and that's okay.
It's funny you brought the whole idea that a sports team wants to think of themselves as a family, because we think about, in business, we say there's a lot of businesses that'll say, oh, we're a family, we're a family, we're a family. And um, going back to what I said, we were talking about earlier, you can't fire your family. So it can't be. So I always tell people Evernest is like a high functioning sports team, right? If your second baseman can't play second base and you can get somebody better to play second base, like, we're going to do that. And if
Right.
you're our second baseman today, you need to know that you either need to work hard, get
Yeah.
better, or we're going to replace you
Yeah,
with
damn
somebody
right.
that can get the job done. And so it's kind of funny that what I would consider a high functioning sports team, wants to think of themselves as a family, when I think they are the epitome of exactly what they need to be thinking. They are the thing I think about when I think
Right.
about stuff.
Well, there's look, people lean on the military and sports, right, in a lot of
Yeah.
leadership analogies and business analogies. But I'm just a firm believer in the best advice and the best sort of quotes and theories are the simplest. There's always behind the scenes dynamics in sports, right? The team's trying to screw you, or the agent's not doing his job, or the players. There's just always like something you can point to, and we're like, maybe that's why it's happening. I'm like, dude, like if you don't like it, just play better. Like, everybody here,
Yeah.
from ticket sales on down, is here to win, and they're not going to put an inferior team on the field. No matter how big a jerk you are, I promise you, if you are the best player that's given us the best chance to win, you will play. So I promise nobody's trying to screw you, right? Just if you don't like it, play better.
Yeah, you hit 35 bombs, then they're gonna play you, and
we'll
you're gonna
find
make
a
a lot
spot
of
for
money.
you. Right. So I do think that there's that balance, right? Like that's where I lean on the athletic stuff, because you should, like, my first full-time job in baseball was with the Cleveland Indians, now Guardians, to be an area scout, and they put me through a meat grinder of an interview process, and they're very process oriented and disciplined with that stuff, and I got the job, and I felt great about myself when I got that job. And I've had people push back and be like, man, this is too exhaustive of a process. Like, we're going to lose people, and they're going to have other offers. I'm like, well, let them take them. If this is too much for them, they're not going to make us any better, right? You should feel like accomplished that you got this job and that you're a part of the team now. And now you can go do some special things. And then every person that you hire after that, you should feel there should be a high bar. Every hire should be a hell yes, or it's a no.
Yeah, it goes back to your Kobe Bryant quote, right? Like, great people don't want to work with average people. And it's funny you called it a meat grinder, because that's exactly what we call our interview process, which is we shortened it to the grinder, but it's named after a meat grinder, because for that exact same purposes, we wanted people to really appreciate being here. And if you do like a couple 30-minute interviews, it feels too easy to get the job.
Yep. Yeah. 100%.
We also found out, like, a little secret is we also found out a lot about people 2 or 3 hours into an interview. They let their guard down. They start to get a little bit weaker. It makes it harder for them to keep a front up for very long. Like, things start to leak out.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's, the military does that all the time, right? They train to exhaustion. They put you through, they put you under stress inoculation exercises for a reason. They got to see how you're going to respond to it. It's really hard to do that in an interview setting. I'm a huge believer that you don't know what you've got with someone until you're with them every day, so unless you have worked directly with this person closely for a period of time, like, you're just guessing. Like, the resume can look good. They can present really well. Some of the worst hires I've made have been like the best interviews, right? Oh, they're just smooth and slick, and they know all right to say, and everybody's like, oh yeah, nicely done. And you're like, that did not work out, right? It's the ones that are almost uncomfortable talking about themselves and maybe don't have the answer off the top of their head. It doesn't mean they're a bad hire. It just means they might be a bad interview.
Yeah, I think my experience has been the more interviews I did, the better I got at it. Mm-hmm. And when the things I think about is, like, the more interviewing reps you have, the better you are. And then the other thing is just having a consistent process so that you can compare with your mental models across different people.
Right.
I was a horrible hire when I first started, but I will tell you, I'm out of practice today. But I got to the point where all I was doing was interviewing people as we were growing the organization. And I could tell from the first couple of responses to my first couple of questions whether somebody was going to be good or not.
Yeah. Yeah. The structure of that, in my mind, is critical, because you have to be able to compare apples to apples. And it's, they should be doing most of the talking, right? Not you. And there's that. I mean, you got to trust your gut with stuff. I mean, it's your vision. It's your organization. You've seen what works and what doesn't. So, again, it gets back to me. I always tell people, like, it's a hell yes or it's a no. If there's any bit of doubt right now, unless it's, look, if you get to this point where you need the sharpshooter in the corner, okay, we'll roll the dice, and we'll have it on a short leash. And if it doesn't work, we'll pivot. But if it's like a core player that you need to be, a part of your organization, part of your culture, and an addition, then it should be a hell yes.
Yeah.
All right, last question. I'm going to let you go. How do you define a good teammate?
The first thing that comes to mind is one of our core values, and our core value is win together. My perception of a good teammate is somebody that puts the team above themselves, above their personal comfort. And when I think about great organizations that I've seen in the past, people are very sacrificial for the team. What's interesting about that is it actually ends up benefiting everybody because everybody wins, and then everybody gets the accolades from that. But when you have people that are more focused on their careers or personal comfort, then that doesn't make a great teammate.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of the great organizations have that at their core, right? You're a big reader in sports as well. So one of my favorite books is Legacy, about the New Zealand All Blacks. I don't know if you've read it, but it dives into their identity. I mean, it's arguably the most successful sports franchise on the planet. And they have very simple, very relatable sort of pillars. One of them, which I love, is no dickheads, right? It's just very simple. Like, you can define that however you want, but everybody knows, right?
No, everybody gets it, right?
Yeah. And the other one is, leave the jersey better than you found it. Like, and that is hence the title of the book. Like, that's your legacy, right? So you're a part of something special, contribute to that, and know that you're leaving it in a better place than where you found it, right? And that's that's again, stuff you teach your kids, right? Like, clean your room, leave it better than you found it, that kind of thing.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I know there's like a documentary of those folks, but have not read the book.
Yeah, it's a great one. I would highly recommend it. I think you'd enjoy it. But, Matthew, thanks for taking the time, man. I really appreciate the insight. It's been awesome to watch what you've been doing as a leader, but also what Evernest has done sort of in conjunction with that. And I know that the challenges change daily in property management in general, but particularly when you're dealing with growth like you guys are. I know it's been you've been punching uphill for a little while now, but I have no doubt that you'll continue to progress it forward.
Well, you're very kind. I enjoyed the talk, and hopefully this will be helpful to somebody.
I'm sure it will. All right, man. Thanks again for the time.
All right. Thanks, Billy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the No One Is Watching podcast. If you'd like to support the show, hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and share it with your friends. If you're interested in similar content focused on leadership, culture, and high performance, check out nooneiswatching.com. Your time is valuable, so I appreciate you spending some of it with me today. See you next time.